Hello and welcome to Franklin Covey's C-Suite Conversations. My name is Patrick Ledden, and each week I have the opportunity to sit down and talk to a senior executive in an organization to learn about their life, their career, what they've learned along the way, the successes they've achieved and the struggles they've overcome, all with one purpose in mind, to share with you, our listeners, some insights that you can use in your work and your career. Today I'm joined by Uxio Malvido. He leads the Global People and Culture Practice at the World Economic Forum. In our conversation today, we talk about his work, how he managed in his career to go from where he initially was in studying chemistry to where he is today in leading people and culture at the World Economic Forum. We learned about the different industries he worked in. We learned about the roles he's had and the various cultures that he's had the opportunity to live in and operate in over the course of those years. Along the way, he'll share with us some insights about the differences among industries and differences among cultures, but more importantly, the things that are consistent everywhere you look and everywhere you work. You're going to want to grab something to write with, sit back and take some notes as Uxio and I get together today in C-Suite Conversations. Uxio Malvido, thanks so much for joining me today in C-Suite Conversations.
That's a real pleasure for me.
It's a pleasure for us. Thank you for making the trek across the pond virtually today. You're over in, did you say Geneva right now?
Geneva, yeah. Switzerland.
Wonderful, yeah. Wonderful. And myself and my team are kind of scattered about the U.S., so it's great to meet you. Folks listening to this podcast may or may know a little bit about your organization. Perhaps they've seen you before and they're familiar with you, but not everybody necessarily knows your entire background. So if you wouldn't mind, if we could start with you telling a little bit about your life and your career, kind of where you came from and how you ended up where you're at right now.
Wow, that's kind of a broad question to start with, but I will
wherever you want.
Summarize very quickly. So the first thing that I have to say is that I'm an HR professional convinced about the value of people in organizations and the importance of the people dimension of businesses. My original background is in chemistry, but also in psychology. So I did also organizational psychology. I was not very much interested in chemistry at the end, although I completed also that degree. And I did a master's on intercultural management because I think on business today, how we do business across different cultures is of particular importance. I started my career as a consultant in Accenture, a period that I love. It was extremely interesting learning opportunity to work with different clients, even in different countries as well. And then from that, I moved to different industries, always within HR, but in different HR capacities, meaning I have been involved in talent acquisition, talent development, leadership development, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also as HR generalist. In industries like pharma, I work at Merck, the pharmaceutical company, the US one. I also work in the cement business, business materials, and then also in public transportation. So I work in mining. I love mining, by the way. I was almost forgetting my experience in mining. That was also wonderful. So I walk my life and my career across different industries, different countries, and different roles within HR. That's kind of in a nutshell. Right now, I'm working at the World Economic Forum. I'm the chief HR officer, so I'm in charge of the people function, people and culture, we call it at the forum. The forum is an international organization. Most of our listeners will know the meetings in Davos, meetings that happens for the last 50 years in the Swiss mountains, where a lot of very important people from businesses and from governments meet together to discuss some important topics going on in the world today. So we are a platform to bring together public and private cooperation on some of the biggest issues that we all face in terms of the world today. That is what the World Economic Forum is all about. Is those meetings in Davos, and after those meetings in Davos, many other events and initiatives that we run with our partners. Those partners being very big companies, but also most of the governments in the different regions of the world that come together with the business. Yeah.
Well, thank you for walking through that. I'm going to actually take you right back to the beginning of the conversation as we started, because there are some people
Okay.
listening to the podcast, and maybe they're early on in their career, or they want to know, like, how did you get into HR? So you specifically said, I'm an HR professional. So it wasn't like I just happen to work in HR. It's like, this is my profession. It was a chosen profession. But you said you had early on interest in chemistry, probably still do to some degree because you're interested in other scientific issues like mining. So how did you end up getting in HR? When you went into consulting, did they just put you on an HR project, or did you walk in the door and say, I'm a talent person, or how did that play out?
So I think, so first of all, I studied chemistry, but then I realized that it was not resonating for me. It was kind of later on in my career, I recognized of value of having a chemistry background in the way I even structure documents, I look at reality and all of that. But from a technical point of view, it was not resonating for me. On the contrary, when I studied psychology, and I did kind of both in parallel, I was really fascinated by human behavior and organizational behavior. So it's humans put together in the context of organizations. So from that very early on, so I was not interested in clinical psychology or therapy. It's interesting to know about it, but I was not interested in doing that as a psychologist. My real passion was around how people interact with each other in organizations, and from that angle, how we can create more human-based organizations and business. How we can ensure that our business make profit and deliver value for our shareholders, but we do it in a way that are respectful and mindful of human boundaries, human potential, so that they create also those space for people. I firmly believe there is a space of convergence between business, people, value for everyone at the end. Yeah.
So one thing,
And when I started in consultancy, I did projects on what it was called human capital, in fact.
It's similar actually in regard to how I ended up doing a lot of human capital related work early on. Was I had been in the military, I came out of the Army, and I went to KPMG Consulting. And at that point, they probably could have put me on, a number of different functional areas just to kind of start to learn. And I just happened to be put on human capital projects, and that's kind of took my career from there. But it became very fascinating, as you said, to kind of think about human behavior, organizational behavior, and then the rest of the story played out from there. But one thing you talked about in your bio, and I read about in preparing for this, is the fact that you worked across industries and also geographies globally. And I'd love to hear you just kind of riff a bit on this. But what have you learned is similar and different across industries? What have you learned that are similar and different across geography when it comes to your role in developing talent?
Yeah. I think, well, first of all, I think I have enjoyed all the chapters of my career development. And I always explain also that I have enjoyed being a team leader, but also to be an individual contributor, and being in senior roles, even not having a team. So I think it's very important to try to leverage the different opportunities that life throws to you. So for me, different industries have always been a window to different realities. When you work in different industries or in different businesses, you learn around what that business is all about. What is the value of the products or the services that company is delivering? And you understand a part of reality and society that you were not aware of. So when you work in pharma, you learn a lot about healthcare, and you know how some of the drugs works in the body, how the healthcare system works, the importance of health for all of that. When you work in mining, you realize the value of the different metals and materials in our daily lives, and how those are traded globally. So for me, walking across different industries have always been nurturing my curiosity about different angles of reality and of life. That on one hand. From a cultural point of view, equally, working across cultures really helps you to understand how the place where we live and where we are born shapes many of our worldviews, many even of our values about what is acceptable, not acceptable in the workplace, how we relate to each other. Our societies and our countries shape the way power and influence is structured. And that has an influence around how companies operate and how management and decisions are being made in companies. When you work in a country like France, which is, as I did, which is one of the most centralized countries in the world, that is reflected in many of the management culture around how decisions are made in French companies, how they agree and disagree. And part of the French culture is to have strong battles of ideas. And it's okay to disagree because it's almost like an intellectual battle around who has the best argument. When you work with a US company, as I have worked in several steps in my career, you understand how practical the mindset is. So maybe it's not the best idea, but it's the idea that will make the biggest impact or that we can implement quicker, Mm-hmm. So all of those things are different across countries. And yes, again, the cultural norms and how that are reflected in the workplace, how the distance between an employee and a manager reflects. So the kind of relationship that can also be different. Now, what is common? What is common is human nature. And human nature, our universal need to connect to each other, the universal importance of empathy, of social skills on how we relate to each other, the importance of everyone to feel they are part of something important, the importance of purpose in organization or in businesses, the importance of being included or to feel that you belong to the team spirit. So some of those things were kind of universal in that sense, even if you work across different industries or different countries. Yeah.
So as you mentioned earlier, you said the idea of like chapters. I've enjoyed every chapter of my journey. Over the last 11 years, I've been a professor at Vanderbilt University. And the last couple of years, I ran a project there called the Disruption Project, where we were studying the disruptions that come in life, the small ones and the large ones. And some of them at face value can clearly be like a really wonderful opportunity, but still going to change up things like a new job opportunity or whatever it might be. Other things can be fairly devastating and cause you to really get clear on why you're even here in the first place. So there's a range of disruptions. But I'm just curious in the chapters of your life, when it comes to moving across industries or changing jobs or moving to another country, many people, either they're early on in their career and they haven't had those opportunities to come yet, those disruptive opportunities to come yet, or maybe they've let a couple pass, they've been a little bit hesitant to do it. What was your process of thinking about these opportunities when they came to you and you said, all right, I'm on a certain path. This is a bit disruptive, but it could be a great new opportunity. How do you think that thing through? And what advice would you give to people that the next time something like that comes their way, how they might want to consider it?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I realized, over time that at the end, the appetite for change or the curiosity comes in different degrees for different people, So at times it's difficult to provide like an advice because for some people it won't resonate. I'm a curious person by nature, and I love to learn about different topics, and I love the idea of having different experiences because I do think everything in life is a chapter. Every chapter is meaningful, but every chapter is kind of temporary at the end. So I actively seek for some of the opportunities. So for instance, I spent I spent first 4 years in consultancy working in different projects and all of that. But then I spent good 11 years working at Merck and Co, the company, the American company. And I remember working there and thinking, I love healthcare and I love the company, but I just don't want to retire just knowing healthcare and just knowing this company. So it was very clear for me that at one given point, the drive for me to seek a new experience is going to kick in and to come. So in that sense, I actively look for opportunities to work in different countries or to work in different industries. Now, I think every life is different. At times, you don't need to move across countries to have relevant experiences, you know. Mm-hmm. And for some people, it's a particular struggle or very disruptive to think about a country with a different culture and a different language, you know. From my point of view, all of those are opportunities to learn, to test your own limits. But you don't need to, I think every individual needs to find the right level of challenge for themselves so that they also feel that they can manage, you know, that you know. From my point of view, I would advise people to actively seek for always new opportunities, new experiences, and when they come their way, try to leverage that, you know. So instead of resisting or, you know, of course, you always need to balance. You need to do a proper assessment. Is this the right opportunity or not, you know? And there's always an individual response to that. But yeah.
Well, as you were saying that, I jotted down the words appetite is different. People have different appetite for change, for seeking it out, or to kind of trying to go towards stability in any given moment. And I think that really got me thinking about, as I was preparing for the conversation, I was struck by the number of, you know, initiatives and things that you're trying to change and implement at your organization. And there's one side of me that's struck by the sheer number or the volume or things that you're trying to do that are important right now. And secondly, is some of these are not easy slam dunks. They're pretty tough things to do. And I would imagine there are people listening right now who maybe they're in similar roles to you are organizationally or wherever they might be, and they're trying to get things done as well. Would you mind telling a little bit about some of the key leadership development initiatives you're implementing right now and how you see those impacting culture?
Yeah, I will do that in a second, but I just had an additional thought to the previous question. That is the following. I really do think that change happens always. So we live in a moment of time that is very disruptive, and you used that word before. I think there are a lot of disrupting factors in our lives. So I think the way we manage change ourselves and we become resilient is at times jumping to the opportunities instead of trying to resist that, because at the end it will happen to us. So I do think, you know, there's a thought that we all should have, that is, whether we like it or not, things will happen to us and will happen to our lives. Our ability to cope with those changes can be also developed and trained. So at times we do need to lean into discomfort to be able to become better in that sense. So I just wanted to close the chapter.
Actually, one of our founders, Stephen Covey, talked about that. He talked about that there's three things that you can count on in life: change, choice, and principles of behavior. And change is a really big component of that. So let's I'll reset the question. And I appreciate you going back and doing that. I was asking you about the initiatives you have coming up, and let's kind of frame that in change. There's a lot of changes that you're trying to do. Right, for the better and things, but there's people that might be like excited about it and people a little hesitant about it. Tell us a little bit about some of the initiatives you have in place and how you see that impacting your organization.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I have to say that I see leadership and culture as part of two interdependent factors. So you need to change leadership if you want to change culture. And because culture helps to perpetuate a kind of leadership. Mm-hmm. Culture determines who gets developed or not. Who do we consider successful or not? But if there are also elements in the culture that you want to change, you also need to work on a new leadership standard, So it's kind of, you need to act on those elements of the equation. Leadership and culture are intimately connected. So for us right now, leadership is essential. And it's essential because I think leadership drives not only the successes of the organization externally, what we're able to achieve, drives also how our employees feel about the organization and the institution. So we need a leadership model that connects or reconnects what we achieve externally with who we are internally. So one of the fundamental first steps that I took as part of transforming HR at the forum was frame a new leadership model that puts back on the table that the important thing that a leader needs to achieve is not only the what the results, is extremely important the how we achieve those results and what are the how we leverage the teams and what are the behaviors that we display. Not only the external facing results, it's also how we get there. And the way to make that message stick is by framing and making it very clear. So the new leadership expectation is not only what you achieve in terms of results, it's how you inspire people, how you collaborate with each other, how you develop a more self-aware leader. I do believe that self-awareness is at the core of the leadership journey. So we all become better over time. We all manage our own transitions as leaders by becoming more self-aware over time. Because when we grow as leaders and we have bigger teams or new scopes, all of that is a personal transition. It's a new identity that you need to build. In that journey, you need self-awareness. So anyway, providing a framework, articulating for people what is the kind of leader that we expect from now on, is then the first kind of a step, being clear around the new expectation. Then is assessing where we are, and we're doing some leadership assessments, some 360, so that people see themselves through the eyes of other people in their journey. And then the final block is, can we develop interventions to develop those kind of leaders that we expect to see? If we're asking them to display some behaviors and capabilities, can we then build in development programs that help them to develop those capabilities? Because I think during my career, what I have seen is that many businesses are losing sight on the fact that leadership is developed. Leadership is not innate. None of us are born as leaders. Leadership is a responsibility, it's a function. It's a function that you do with other people and in service of other people. But in that function and that identity that you develop, you learn to be a leader and to be a better leader. So leadership development, some of the programs that we do as partnering with you, with Franklin Covey, for instance, is on that idea of we need to invest and develop leadership as a core capability for the institution. Anyway,
at Franklin Covey, we talk about leadership. Sometimes we'll say like a great leader will assess a great leader oftentimes by the results they deliver. But we think you have to kind of peel that back, right? So it's not just the results they deliver, but they're different in how they behave. And you talked about behaviors. And they're not only different in how they behave, but they behave certain ways because they're different in how they think. And then there's actually a level below that, which is they're different in who they are. So the ability, the character component really matters. And when you mentioned, Uxio, this idea of self-awareness, saying such a critical thing, I'm just wondering from a very tactical perspective, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because there's the one component where you give the 360 assessment and people provide someone feedback. Then there's the other piece where the person receiving it, the leader receiving it, has to be open and willing to receive that. It has to be self-aware enough to go, okay, I need to really see who I am, not just through the eyes of others, but through my own eyes as well, and kind of take all that into consideration. What do you do to help leaders when they get that 360 feedback to really go through it with a discerning eye, but also an open kind of heart and mind to embracing what people are saying?
Uh, that is a tough one in the sense that I do believe, so I have this fundamental belief that everyone can be developed, that everyone has some potential that can be unleashed, Then what I realized was, of course, as well over time is that some people don't want to be developed, or some people don't display self-awareness, And it's a tough realization for me because it's like letting go something, It's kind of assuming in some of the cases I have seen profiles that fundamentally reject any feedback, so that the level of self-awareness is extremely low. And that, they look at the world through is all external agency, but they are not accountable of anything. It's like they never see as part of the picture. I do think we are always part of the context. We all have a context on how we behave, but we are part of the picture. What you cannot do is to remove yourself and then just blame just on others constantly or in the context, So we have seen that some leaders do struggle with that. What I do think is that the earlier we develop that and we develop that capability, the better for the leader. So it's much harder when you are talking about that with a very senior leader than when you just realize that in an early people manager. So an early people manager that you need to coach them and to realize that what they do have impact on other people, for instance, versus doing that level of awareness with the leaders that have been operating for many years without being aware of the impact they have on others.
Yeah, because then
So
they
I
have
think
they have a track record they can point to, right? As well, these leaders who maybe are more, they're like, yeah, I don't need to listen to that because look at the successes I've had. So there's almost this success can breed a lack of self-awareness sometimes.
And that is the drama. I think that is the drama for business. I think that is the drama for societies, because I think we need to go back to how you do things matter and the impact you have on other people matter for leadership roles, And the better we establish that connection, the better for the leaders and the better for the teams, But back to your original question, what we're planning to do is to help people look at their 360s, try to foster their self-awareness with some support from some people who are able to coach them, to help them frame and look at that feedback in a constructive way, so that instead of letting them to their own devices or their own kind of by default assumptions when they read the 360, having someone that really walk them through that feedback to make the most out of it. It is not a guarantee that all of them are going to accept it or are going to react positively to it, but we're trying to increase the chances that feedback will have a positive impact and a constructive input to readdress some behaviors when it's needed. Yeah.
No, that makes absolute sense. I'm curious given your role. So this is C-suite conversations. We're talking to executives oftentimes. We're so appreciative that you joined us. But given your role that you wear the hat of a member of an executive leadership team, and also the role of people and culture, kind of talent. You have peers that are peers with you to talk about the organization, but they're also talent in the organization. How do you for those people who are aspiring to get into more senior HR roles or there right now, how do you handle the reality that the members of your team are also talent you're looking to develop, but at the same time they're peers in that world?
I think HR leaders are in a unique position, because I always say that at the end, at the core of what an HR leader wants to achieve has to be collective success. Because, when you, with your peer group, when you work with your president, or with your colleagues at executive level, you really want, as an HR leader, people to be successful. So when you help them develop as leaders, because you really want them individual to be successful, but also collectively you want the institution or the business to be more successful. So that, I think, is a privileged position for any HR professional to be in, and to look at the roles, on how you are enabling the success of other people. The same thing happens with your teams. It's not about what you achieve individually, is how you as a function or as an HR function grow also your own internal talent of HR professionals, to become better and to grow in their journey. So, yeah.
I love what you said there around that balance component of both the business being successful and leaders flourishing, which they're obviously interconnected type of things, but you're kind of wearing one hat that says, I want to make sure the organization's overall successful, but also I want to unleash the talent of all these people almost so they individually have effective and fulfilling experiences.
Yes, because we need to achieve a bit of a win-win situation. I think what gets wrong very often is that people look at their individual success as in isolation. My individual success is like the failure of my colleague, or for me to shine, I need to someone not to shine that much,
Mm-hmm.
So making that shift of mindset, when we do leadership development, that this is both individual and team success and achievement, is a critical one. Equally, I think it would be a mistake just to put all the eggs on the team success and team achievement. I do think individuals need a sense of personal fulfillment and achievement. So it's totally legitimate that any executive, any leader, any people manager wants to be successful. So there's no contradiction. We want that individual success, but not in contradiction with other people's successes, and that's why I do think the behaviors that we display are so important, so that your achievement doesn't come at the expense of really undermining someone else. That is, what we need to establish the boundaries around what is right behaviors, and I would say even the values that we stand for in an organization,
So as
so
we
that everyone is.
oh, go ahead, please finish that up.
No.
So as we finish up our conversation, I'm just thinking about the typical question I ask at the end. But your answer is a little bit, I'm going to change it a little bit because there's a different dynamic going on here in regard to, typically I'll ask, and I will ask you about, if someone's earlier on in their career or somewhere along midway in their career, what advice would you give them based upon how they can kind of move forward in their career? So kind of general advice that'll be helpful to folks. And certainly every guest that joins us can talk about it from their own career experience. They can also talk about it from what they've seen other people do within their organization or within their industry. But then you have this other layer in your world, because as you mentioned, you bring minds together, some of the most brilliant minds together, some of the most influential folks together, and have these conversations. So there's kind of another layer that you could bring into this. So I'm just going to let you go, but I'm just curious, as we finish it up, whether you're pulling from what you've heard some people say at events that you all have run, or from your own career, or maybe a little bit of both. What one piece of advice or a couple pieces of advice would you give to our listeners, whether they're just starting out or they're further along in their careers, about how they can continue to progress forward?
So I'm going to go back to something that you mentioned very quickly in our previous conversation. That is, I think there's a fundamental importance on who you are as a person and your traits. I think that is an anchor point in any leadership journey. And it's something that very often leaders forget. It's very easy for leaders to jump into the career race, the political dynamics and power dynamics of organizations, and to forget who they are and who they want to be, you know. So some people over time realize that they did things that they regret, or that, you know, they are not finding the fulfillment that they were, you know. So I do think there's an importance of every leader to reconnect often who they are, and that is not a static thing. It can be a dynamic thing, because it can be not only who you are, is who you want to be, how you want to be seen, what is the impact you want to have, you know, so that you just don't go run after the title, the money, the external recognition, but you connect with something kind of deeper with yourself, you know. So that is an important advice. The other one would be leverage everything that comes your way. I do think very often we experience conflict, discomfort, failure. And I think in all of that, there's an opportunity to learn or to reflect. You know? So I think self-reflection is a very important advice. I do think very often people forget about it. You know, they move from one failure to the next thing, or they don't analyze what happened, you know. Or it's not because they made a mistake or because they have a negative reaction from someone, and they just move on and say, well, they don't give importance to that. So I do think self-reflection is part of that self-awareness that will help in any kind of leadership journey. My final thought is, you're right. In my work at the World Economic Forum, I work with very bright people. We work as an organization with very influential and very important leaders of the world, CEOs of companies, presidents of countries, you know. My thinking is that behind all those people, there's a human being that has his own fears, hopes, their own journey. So there's that individual connection that we need to reestablish through leadership and leadership development. And as we move to artificial intelligence, technological disruption, going back to the basics of human leadership, a leadership that helps people to connect with each other from a peer point of view, with the teams, with others, is just essential to keep progressing collectively. Yeah.
That is, you know, it's I was reflecting on everything you've said. I had jotted down earlier when we were talking about different industries, different cultures, working across different cultures as well. You use words like, there's some key things that are consistent. Empathy, relationships, being part of something, purpose is really important. And it's interesting as we circle back around to the end of the conversation, continue to hear that same thing, whether it's the influential leader with a big title and lots of responsibility and large impact that might come to a forum. And you have to realize behind that, that's a person who still wants relationships. It's still a person who wants to be part of something important. And the same thing is true for every listener on the podcast, and obviously for you and I as well. You know, relationships matter, and the impact we make in a team, or the feeling that we're doing is important, is so critical. Uxio, I really appreciate our conversation. I love the insights that you shared, and I just wish you all the best in your life and in your work. And if we at Franklin Covey can ever do anything to help you out, just let us know.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I have also enjoyed a lot all of our conversation, and I really value the partnership we have with all of you as well. Thank you very much.
Well, folks, that's all we have for today's session. Big thanks to Uxio Malvido for joining me today to talk about his work, his career, what he's learned along the way, all with one idea in mind: to help you to be more successful in tackling whatever matters most to you. Thanks for joining me. My name's Dr. Patrick Ledden. Now go make it a great day.